more nyanyas, the poultry farm, you know, the pork farmer. That's the way to go.
Absolutely.
But we seem to be so content just talking about 1 million tourists. Doesn't make sense to me.
I see what you mean. Talk about energy, and more specifically, and you're right, we are, in terms of importing fuel products, and we always get hit whenever the prices skyrocket in the global market. So what should you do in terms of storage then? Or is that also not, it doesn't quite protect us in as far as such vagaries are concerned?
I think you need, first of all, to look at public transport system.
Yes.
Because that helps in a lot to make people reduce amount of traveling in their own personal cars, introduce rapid rail system in some of the major cities, including Nairobi, because those two would help in reduction of the requirement of having to import fuel.
I see.
Then have enough power in terms of geothermal and green energy. Because what are we doing now? We are actually fueling KPLC through generators,
yes,
and therefore we are importing
more fuel.
More fuel.
Yes.
Which means at the end of the month, you look at your bill and there's fuel adjustment cost,
absolutely,
which seems more or less as similar as the amount of consumption from power.
Right.
Which means they've lost out from their core business to supplying power through generators.
Right.
So you realize that Kenya as a growing country requires more megawatts than we currently have.
That's true.
In the next 5 years, we anticipate we require about 5,000 megawatts. We're only producing about 1,000, right? Through hydro and through geothermal. So we need to expand these facilities. If it's geothermal, we need to go and, extract it and make sure we have about 5,000 to 10,000 megawatts.
I see what you
mean. Then you reduce the cost of consumption of power in terms of production of power. And two, you reduce the cost of manufacturing. Because at the moment, cost of manufacturing is very high.
Absolutely.
Because they have to put power costs.
So you're happy with what Kenya Association of Manufacturers did recently in terms of investing a lot more in energy?
Yes.
Does that help in terms of also just in terms of the entire industry in reducing the cost of production in this country?
We have to bring the cost of production
it looks
to be
like he was saying
competitive.
Government has done nothing, so let's just put this thing together.
Yes.
So what is the weakness there in terms of government formulation?
We seem not to want to change with times. We want to rely on cheaper options. Why should we continue importing oil to produce power? We have very clear places where you can get geothermal.
Yes.
You need to invest now for the future.
Yes.
Solar, windmill,
yes,
wind farm,
yes,
right? If you go to Loyangalani, if you go to Marsabit, the amount of wind there is enough to actually spur development on the northern side of Kenya.
That's true, yes.
And let's face it, Jimmy, what is the shoreline of our coast? It's 350 kilometers. Lake Victoria is 150 kilometers. Lake Turkana is 800 kilometers. No tourism activities because there are no roads, there is no power, there's no security. These are things we need to think as we move on.
Absolutely. Now, his second question borders on what you've just talked about in terms of the general performance of the economy. But let me just ask you, maybe there's something there you can add on to. He says, assuming you won the presidency, how will you ensure that the economy operates at 90% capacity, that there is employment for those on the labor market, and at the same time reducing the public wage bill as you increase the capital expenditure?
We must identify what our problems are, right? Our major problems in the next 10 years,
right,
and some of them are there now. One is unemployment. We have 35 to 40% rate of unemployment as we speak.
True.
Yet 50% of our population is below 18. So you can imagine in 10 years what that means in terms of unemployment. It's a very dangerous trend. And what are we doing about it? Absolutely nothing, so to speak. The second element is food security.
Yes.
What are we doing? We are destroying food basket areas by settling people. We are settling real estate in some of those food basket areas. Our population is growing at the rate of 1.2 million a year, Jimmy, which means in 10 years, you're talking of another 12 million people over and above the 40 million, and they will need food. So to fix these two, you first of all need to do fundamentals. First of all, make sure the security is right.
That was going to be the next one.
Right?
Yes.
Because you want to have local investors and you want to have foreign investors coming in. That's the only way you can expand the economy and create wealth if people are secure to invest.
Absolutely.
The second thing you have to do is actually to invest in infrastructure. And Kenyans pay. They pay 9 shillings per litre in terms of fuel levy. So we collect about 45 billion a year from direct taxes of fuel levy, which means we can fix our infrastructure in the next 3-4 years, right? Build new roads,
Yes.
open up the country,
Yes.
ensure there are no traffic jams. You know, Uhuru Highway is an express road.
Yeah, absolutely.
But today is the biggest,
The biggest car park,
in
yeah.
East Africa.
Losing
And I've
50
said
million a
this,
day. Yes, that's
because
true.
everybody gets parked there. So you lose more in terms of fuel, in terms of amount of fuel that
Yes.
is consumed in the car parks, and in terms of human
Human
resource
resources,
hours.
absolutely.
People get wasted in car parks. The third thing you have to fix is water. We are a country that is scarce in water,
Yes.
right? Now, we can't even do irrigation, we can't do hydro. So you have to invest in harnessing and conservation.
Absolutely.
The fourth thing is you have to actually work on the healthcare system because you want to have a healthy population.
That's true.
And you have to reform the education sector so that it produces what the country needs.
Right. That's right.
So the first two, unemployment and food security, with these 5 fundamentals, then you build on a strong economy.
Well done. Somebody's asking, his name is, let me just get this on the SMS service. Tom Otino is asking, are you a gutsy, will you be a gutsy president? I'm talking about our borders being insecure. I'm talking about people bullying us in terms of coming into our own country and kidnapping people as we watch.
I think there is a lot of security laxity, and we invest a lot every year. We read budgetary allocations to add security ministry. To me, this is simple laxity. The sovereignty of Kenya must never be in doubt, right?
I need you to speak as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
Let me tell you, and I'll tell you about this,
Yes.
Jimmy. When I grew up in Eastlands, Jogoo Road police station had 20 police cars.
Yes. Yes.
The population was less, right? Today, probably they have 2 cars, one for the OCPD and another one for patrol, which has 20 liters of gas. Doesn't make sense, right? Those cars needed to patrol 200 kilometers a night. It was mandatory. So every time you went out, you saw a police car.
That's true.
Visibility. How many police cars do you see in town? How many policemen do you see? People need to see that they are secure so that deterrent can occur.
Absolutely.
I want to be absolutely clear. I was a little disappointed that only the police commissioner went to Lamu. This is where we want to put the second port. As a commander-in-chief, I would have gone that route immediately, and probably the security operators would have also followed, because you need to show the stamp of authority.
True.
In security issues, and you need to deal with them as they occur. What happens within Ethiopian border, again, you need to see the might of our police force, the might of our armed forces. And as I said, one of the fundamentals is security. You need to ensure that local investors and foreign investors and citizens feel secure because you have a very secure security regime.
Well done. The next batch of questions basically are pertaining to nationalism. We've seen tribal alliances, and you speak very powerfully about such things. Like this question here from Juguna, he says, which part of the country is your stronghold? Which measures as president would you take to save the endangered Central youth? And he's saying, follow the right procedure in seeking presidency because you're the best chief executive officer for this country that I know. Powerful. Talk about cohesiveness, nationalism, which is waning in this country. We've heard you being called nusu, whatever the case may be. How will you galvanize this country to think more positively as Kenyan, not really forgetting where they come from culturally, but to think largely as Kenyans? How will you galvanize
Jimmy,
this
when
country?
I grew up in Eastlands, and I keep on saying this, we grew up as kids within there. We didn't know about tribes. We knew each other as Kenyans. When I went to school in Ziwani at Starehe Boys, again, it was all one big thing. My classmate for 6 years and deskmate was actually Julius Kimgetich of KWS.
Well done, yes.
So we saw each other as brothers. This issue of tribalism is an issue that has been brought in for political expediency.
Explain.
All right? That people want to retreat to tribal cocoons to try and share out the resources of Kenya. And I'm saying it can't work. It worked with the old order. It won't work with the new order. where you have more younger people who are going to take part in elections and who do not have tribal inclinations. Things have changed, Jimmy. We have a new constitution.
Yes.
That is one.
Yes.
The younger generation now constitute of nearly 65% of the voting machine. And I can give you the statistics, Jimmy. Between age 0 to age 15, it's 45% of the population. Between age 16 and age 60 is 51% of the population. Over 60 is 4%. So for a long time, we've been beholden to the 4%, right? And I'm saying that the younger generation now has many ways of communicating. IT has come in handy. Urbanization is coming in handy. 10 years ago when Moi was the president, he relied on 70% of the rural population and only 30 was urban. Now it's 50-50, right? Now the diaspora is going to take part in elections. They have an interest now because they can vote.
Yes.
So they are going to seek the best practices they've seen from wherever they are.
That's true.
So we must deal with this issue of tribalism. This is why I've said I'm not interested in alliances that are based on tribal grounds. I'm not interested in alliances that are based on hatred of certain individuals or people who have just, you know, differed and therefore form alliances to show up their differences.
Right.
I'm interested in alliances that will come up with ideas that will try and get Kenya out of the ditch and move it forward. Alliances that will address unemployment, alliances that will address food insecurity that prevails in our country. That is the only way we can build our country. It's not about me. It's about all of us. It's about our kids. Why do you report here very early in the morning? You report here because you want to work hard for your family. But what kind of a country do you want to leave your family in when you retire?
I see what you mean.